Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Jolin, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Results for America. We're proud to host today's session with our great partners at the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Bloomberg Philanthropies. And today we're discussing the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, EECBG, formula grant program, which provides $430 million in flexible funding for local governments to cut carbon emissions, improve energy efficiency, and critically to reduce energy use. All eligible cities that submit a satisfactory application can claim their EECBG formula grant funds. Local governments can apply through October 31st, 2024, and tribes can apply through May 31st, 2025. A significant portion of the EECBG dollars are still unclaimed. So our lineup of federal speakers and city officials are going to provide information about how cities can find out if they're eligible for funding, the types of projects it can be used for, and best practices for your application. So on that note, I'm pleased to welcome our first speaker, Leslie Four, who is the Technical Program Officer of the EECBG program at the U.S. Department of Energy. Thanks so much, Leslie. We appreciate you being here. I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate you guys inviting me to be a part of this webinar today. And hello to everyone who has joined. As Michelle said, my name is Leslie Four. I am the Technical Project Officer serving the Southeast region of the United States. So my grantees are North Carolina down to Florida, over to Mississippi and up to Tennessee. That's my region that I focus on. So I'm what you will look like when you start interacting with your project officer, hopefully. So let's go ahead and kick off the slide deck here. Thank you. And let me just explain what the EECBG program is. As Michelle said, it's a highly flexible formula grant program for which 1,878 local governments receive direct allocations. And counties that didn't receive a direct allocation may still be eligible to apply for funds through their state energy office. So state energy offices also receive direct allocations, and they're required to subgrant 60% of those funds to ineligible entities. And these funds can be used for just about anything that reduces carbon emissions or promotes energy conservation in your community. So there are three important things to remember about the EECBG program. It's highly flexible and formula-based. As I mentioned, it's formula-based. The allocations were determined by population size. There are 14 eligible use areas, and they really do cover a wide range of potential projects, from building audits to energy efficiency retrofits to strategic planning to workforce development. The main takeaway here is that if you have an idea for how you can bring down carbon emissions in your community, EECBG is probably a good avenue to at least fund part of it, if not all. Number two, we have an alternative to the traditional application process. So DOE knows that applying and reporting on federal grants can be a significant administrative burden. So we've created an alternative to the traditional application called vouchers for either equipment rebates or technical assistance. And they really do cut down on this burden. We recommend the voucher option for eligible entities with awards lower than $250K, including local governments. You can contribute your entire allocation to a voucher. And the third thing to remember about the program is that our application deadline is coming up pretty soon. It's October 31st, 2024. Next slide, please. So let's talk about what you can do with these funds. Listed on this slide are all of the eligible use categories. And I'm showing you this not to go into detail for each one, under which there are multiple activities that you can undertake, but to give you a sense of the breadth of the projects and programs that you can pursue with this funding. We're going to look at some specific examples here shortly. So some of you might remember EECBG from the American Recovery and Reinvestment, or ARA days. This current program is funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and with the bill, as we like to call them, there's a new eligible use category, number 14 down there in the right-hand corner, which could include a myriad of activities from capital investment projects to workforce development programs. It's really a very flexible category. The key takeaway is that if you have a project in mind that ultimately reduces energy use and/or fossil fuel emissions, EECBG can probably fund it. Next slide. So how do you decide between the traditional grant and the new option, the voucher that I mentioned? There are a few things to know. So let's start with why would you choose a traditional grant? The two main reasons are grants provide the maximum amount of flexibility. You can use the funds for projects that incur significant administrative costs, such as paying for staff time or implementing financing programs or offering a workforce training program. And the funds, if you choose the traditional grant, can be either drawn down as an advance or be reimbursement based. So why choose a voucher? The main thing is that it's a much smaller administrative burden, which is great if your staff is capacity or resource restrained. The summary of vouchers is this. Essentially, it's a shorter application process with fewer reporting requirements. We can also review and process your application more quickly. So this is the route to go if you've got a pretty straightforward project in mind. There are two kinds of vouchers. There's the equipment rebate voucher and the technical assistance. You can apply for a voucher for the equipment rebate or the technical assistance or both. So for equipment rebates, this can cover equipment and installation. And if you have a specific type of equipment in mind, you just submit the shorter application to DOE. We approve it once we have a complete application. You go out, purchase it, and then DOE will reimburse you, excuse me. Equipment examples include things like EV chargers, LED streetlight retrofits, home insulation, energy efficient home appliances, and much, much more. So the technical assistance voucher, you would submit a statement of work in your application to DOE explaining what type of technical assistance you need. Examples include things like energy planning for your community or energy audits of your facilities or project scoping and many, many more. And DOE will assign a technical assistance provider to you to execute that work. So there are two main benefits to the technical assistance voucher. First, you don't have to go out and procure your own technical assistance provider. And second, technically no money is exchanged with the technical assistance voucher. You basically just put your allocation towards the technical assistance and the provider does the rest. The downside is you don't get to pick your technical assistance provider. But ultimately, the choice is yours. And either way, this is a highly flexible program. I can't emphasize that enough. And the vouchers are a simple option you can pursue if you have a straightforward project in mind. Next slide. So now I'm going to bring this program to life a bit by sharing some real life examples. And while these aren't the only projects that are eligible, the vast majority of our applicants have pursued projects in these 5 different project areas, which include building upgrades, vehicles and transportation, planning, low-income programs and weatherization, and renewables. Next slide. So, starting off with a project highlight in the Midwest. This county is using their allocation of around $77,500 through the equipment rebate voucher option to upgrade their local courthouse. The upgrades include 2 gas furnaces, a water boiler, and upgrading their halogen lights to LEDs. And this county has a high poverty rate, so they wanted to upgrade their infrastructure without burdening taxpayers. Next slide, please. Let's see here. Sorry about that. Second up on our list, we have vehicles and transportation upgrades. These projects usually have less reporting requirements and are excellent options to expand municipal fleets. So next slide. And our example here is one in California where they use their 144,230 allocation as part of an equipment rebate to purchase solar-powered EV chargers. These are really popular, especially in the Southeast. These chargers are multi-purpose, as not only can they be used to charge EVs, but their battery storage can be used as a generator for buildings during extreme weather events. And this particular city wanted to place the equipment at a public library and a civic center for public use, with capacity for charging up to 2 EVs at any given time. These chargers are also portable and they can be moved to serve higher volume areas. Something to highlight about this is that these projects generally do not cause any ground disturbance or require installation, which ultimately reduces reporting requirements such as Build America, Buy America, or the Davis-Bacon Act. Next slide, please. So our next category is planning. There are quite a lot of ways to approach planning depending on your allocation size, your location, and your general needs of either local governments or tribes. But I'm certain these next 3 examples should get everyone a great understanding of flexibility of planning. Next slide, please. The first one here is Lake County, Ohio. They're using their traditional grant allocation of $81,130 to conduct a feasibility design study for a 300-acre commercial solar array in their community. I love this one. The planning will allow the county to provide opportunities for future private and public investment. The commercial array will provide an alternative power source to the community and reduce reliance on fossil fuels. In addition, the construction of the solar array will boost workforce development and create jobs. So through the planning, the solar array will also benefit from a siting evaluation to alleviate concerns from the community about the location. This one was built on a brownfields, so great reuse of that piece of property. Next slide, please. Now, we just saw planning on a larger scale as arrays are pretty large, but here we have something on a much smaller scale upon first impression. This is a county in the Northern Plains using their technical assistance voucher to study the feasibility of transitioning from older heating and cooling systems to newer, more efficient ones in their courthouse. These projects are just as important as potential solar arrays because proper planning prevents poor performance, of course. The cost-saving benefits associated with adequate planning are not to be understated in this building, as this building provides services to the community and the upgrades can reduce utility bills and save costs in the immediate and long term. In addition, for technical assistance vouchers specifically, as DOE selects and pays for the technical assistance administrator, this county does not need to go through a procurement process. Next slide, please. Looks like we only had 2 examples, not 3. Sorry about that. So let's move on to our next category, which is low income and weatherization projects. Next slide, please. So first up, Minneapolis, Minnesota is using their traditional grant of $424,000 plus for home energy upgrades and low-income housing. And they're specifically targeting property owners and renters that earn less than 80% of area median income or live in a city-designated environmental justice area. Minneapolis plans to use 100% of their allocation for ultra-high efficiency heat pumps, water heaters, and other weatherization measures. The city has goals of weatherizing 30,000 homes and reducing energy costs for residents by 50% by 2030. Next slide, please. Last category on our list is renewable energy projects. So next slide. All right, if we look to the southeast, there's a city utilizing their allocation of $135,000 in the form of an equipment rebate voucher to purchase and install solar equipment on their new fire station. Most emergency services buildings use a lot of energy and can be costly to maintain, as you probably all well know. So this city decided that solar panels would allow them to save costs while reducing stress on their local energy grid. And next slide. And our last project highlight, but not the least, this one is in my region. We're moving east to Buncombe County, North Carolina. Their project demonstrates how smaller governments can leverage the EECBG program to advance existing clean energy priorities. And they're doing this by purchasing and installing battery storage at 2 of their county buildings with existing solar systems. One is the Public Safety Training Center and the other is a Health and Human Services building. And the battery storage coupled with the on-site renewable energy generation increases reliability in the face of storms and other extreme weather events. And the aim of this project is to increase energy resilience in these public-facing facilities. All right, next slide, please. Let's talk about how to apply for this program. So it's pretty straightforward. Number 1, the grant is flexible. So the most important step is to take the time you need to decide how you'd like to spend your funds. We have lots of resources available to help you with this. Number 2, then let us know how you intend to apply if you haven't already. For the vouchers, we have a portal that you can go and register directly on and proceed from there. For traditional grants, you'll need to send us what we call a pre-award information sheet, which can be found on our website. And we ask that you do this as soon as possible so that we can connect you with the relevant resources. Then, as I said, we have several resources to support you in the application process, including one-on-one no-cost application support from entities like the International City County Management Association, ICMA, or the National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL. And of course, your project officers and the whole team here at EECBG. And 4, when it comes to actually submitting your application, you'll do so either in the voucher portal or in the page system for traditional grants. And I'll go into details about this on the next slide. But the main thing to know is that we have 2 different web portals to use to apply for the program, one for traditional grants and one for the portal. I'd like to note that you can team up with other eligible entities. So maybe an adjacent city or county also got an allocation and hasn't decided how to proceed yet. So you might be able to team up with them and pool your allocations and only have to submit one application. Next slide, please. This slide lists the many different resources available to help you learn about our program and apply, and you can review your allocations, read through program guidance, check our shovel-ready project list via the blueprints, and also the projects that we've already awarded. We have lots of model projects on our website. So these are resources to review before you get started, just to make you more familiar and more comfortable with the process. And just a friendly reminder, you don't need to know exactly what you'll do with your project to submit an indication to apply, just whether or not you want to choose the voucher or the traditional grant. All right, next slide. We have tons of resources to assist you with the actual application process. You can think of these support systems in 2 ways. First are desk resources, including sample applications and templates. And we also have, again, the free one-on-one application assistance from ICMA or NREL. If you want strategic support, you can access 10 to 20 hours of strategy development support from NREL. And there's an email address there on the slide for getting in touch with them. Next slide, please. And while the above resources can help with that application process, we also have ample support during the implementation phase, just as importantly. And this can come through either our blueprint cohorts programming, which has become quite extensive. The blueprints are essentially monthly 90-minute meetings led by experts in the field who problem solve and share information about specific programs. If you choose one of the 13 blueprint topic areas, you can join peers and other local governments participating in a similar project through this program. And the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, ACEEE, is leading this effort in partnership with several other expert nonprofit organizations. So it's completely optional, but we do hope you'll sign up and take advantage of this opportunity to connect with both experts and your peers pursuing the same types of projects. Okay, next slide, please. I've said a lot, and I'm sure you have many questions. Luckily, there are lots of ways to get in touch with our team. We have bi-weekly office hours every other Friday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. And this is an opportunity to ask your questions about the program either before you apply or during implementation. So feel free to drop in and hear not only answers to your questions, but what others might be asking. We also have, again, the one-on-one application support, and you can simply write to our team directly. They're number 3. That's our general inbox, and we're happy to hear from you. Next slide, please. I think that's my last slide. That is my last slide. So I think we have time now for questions.
That's right. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you so much for all this amazing information. So I wanted, for the folks on the call, I want to encourage you to post your questions in the chat. We will then call on you to come off mute and ask your question. But Leslie has agreed to stay on and answer questions anyone has. I want to turn first to Jamie for our first question.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you, Leslie, for the comprehensive presentation, all of the offers of support for cities. As I was listening to your presentation, it occurred to me that so many of the types of projects that EECBG can fund are also eligible for direct pay. Can you talk a little bit about how DOE is thinking about cities being able to leverage both types of assistance and making sure that the project is scaled at the right size to be able to do that?
Yeah, direct pay, a wonderful thing, and I'm really happy to see some of the first recipients touting about it on places like LinkedIn. So an interesting thing about the EECBG program and the IRS considers our program, and I'm apologies, I'm blanking on the terminology, but because we pre-approve the projects, you can't use your EECBG funds towards a project and receive the tax credit, because they basically see that as double dipping on federal funds. However, if you used EECBG funds as only part of the funding for the project, and your city or county funds for the rest of the project, you can take the tax credit on the funding that you put forward from your entity. So we definitely encourage stacking and braiding and using other tools like direct pay, but that's just a particular caveat to note about the EECBG program.
And so maybe if we just take that, build on that for just a second. So if you have and we saw so many people are interested in changing over street lights, for instance, with solar or even LEDs. And if the project cost exceeds your EECBG allocation for the additional amount you could potentially claim for direct pay, is that right?
Sure. So I guess to give a very, very simple example, if the entire project cost was $200,000 and your EECBG allocation was $100,000, you could use the $100,000 plus an additional $100,000 from your city funds. And when you applied for the tax credit, you could only take the 30% on that $100,000 that the city contributed to the project.
And it looks like we have a question in the chat, and my apologies, everyone, for using a little bit of federal speak. Leslie, would you feel comfortable just giving people just a minute on what direct pay is? we can also provide some information in the chat.
This is not my area of expertise
Yeah.
at all. The direct pay is basically a new and a wonderful opportunity for entities that don't traditionally pay taxes to take advantage of, what the rest of the world knows as tax credits. So if you're doing a solar project, typically if you're a homeowner, you can get a tax credit on that what you paid for that solar array that you put on your home. Now, local governments that don't traditionally pay taxes can do that as well. But if I would have schooled myself a little better on direct pay beforehand, but that's about the limit of my knowledge on it.
And we've shared some resources in the chat, and I'll put some more in. We've had on the local infrastructure hub side many sessions where Leslie's colleagues from the Treasury Department and from the White House have joined us to talk about this novel financing mechanism and the many ways that you can support it. So sorry, Leslie, for putting you on the spot, but that was a perfect summation. And I think, as you start to think cities about your project, and if the budget is coming in well over your EECBG allocation, it's a nice option for being able to get reimbursement for some of those upfront costs. And I'll turn it back to Michelle to call on our other participants.
Excellent. So we have a few questions that have now been posted. Katie Martell, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure, I can do that. Yeah, I'm in the city of Alhambra. We're in Southern California, and we have been going kind of round and round with what we want to do with our EECBG funds. And I'm just curious, is this something that we can expect energy to fund in future years, or are we looking at this as like a one and done and choose wisely?
Great question. So as I mentioned in the slide presentation, this was funded under the Obama administration originally, and brought back under the current administration. I would love it. Everyone here in the program would love it if this became an annual appropriation. That's not currently in the works, but if you feel like advocating for it, that would be amazing. So currently I'd have to say it's one and done.
And I would just say it helps with advocacy on these things if we see great projects put into action. So if cities leave money on the table and don't claim the credit, or the project doesn't come to fruition, it is much harder to make the case for future rounds of funding. So we want to hear about all the great ways that you're putting this money into action, how it's achieving your goals on conservation, on equity, and we'll share those far and wide so that we can get future rounds of funding.
To that point, do you think I can ask a quick follow-up? One of the things that we keep kind of going back and forth on is, should we use our 130 something thousand for like doing some planning, like to have a master plan for solar projects in the city or our fleet transition? Or should we be putting these more like on the ground, like doing our DC fast chargers and, kind of leveraging that with some other funds that we have? Do you have any thoughts on what's going to have that kind of impact?
Yeah, both are completely appropriate. I think if you have a shovel-ready project and the amount of the funding allocation, sort of exactly fits into that, boom. But I think we as a program aspire to see this as seed funding. So more to the planning side, we'd love to see entities use this strategically to plan for the future. For long-term sustainability.
We have a couple of questions about eligibility. So one of them is, can small cities below 20,000 apply, 20,000 people apply? And then can a public community college apply for this program? Do you want to speak a little bit to the eligibility?
Yeah, so eligibility is determined, it was determined by a formula. And so not every local government or tribe was eligible. I think only federally recognized tribes were eligible. And the size of your population determined whether or not you got a formula allocation. There is a list on our website, and when the next when the panel comes up, I'll drop that link in the website so you can see if your entity is on our list of eligible entities. And again, every state got an allocation, and they are required to subgrant 60% of that funding to ineligible local governments. A community college could potentially be a subgrantee, a sub-awardee through their adjacent local government or something like that, but they're not eligible to apply directly.
Thank you. Erin Keefe, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Thank you, Janie.
Hi there. Thank you for responding to these questions directly. Really appreciate the time. We're working on a replacement building for a municipal facility. So that does involve a tear down and a rebuild, and that's for resilience purposes to bring it away from the waterfront. But from a closer read of the voucher, it really seems like it's limited to existing buildings only. So I'm hoping you can speak a little bit to, if there is an opportunity for us to justify a need for air source heat pump equipment or insulation equipment for a new build.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So the critical piece behind the energy efficiency and conservation block grant is that it's meant to reduce energy usage or fossil fuel emissions. So that means it has to be replacing energy or reducing energy where it was being used before. So for that reason, new construction is pretty much completely eliminated from the program.
And in this case, this is, a facility that would be in the baseline, and it's removing that load and building a new facility that hopefully has a smaller load.
Yeah, I know. It's tough because it seems like it's going to save energy because there was a building there before that was, using a 20-year-old HVAC system or something like that. I would email us and give us more details about the project so that we don't rule it out entirely, but generally speaking, new construction is not within the parameters of the program.
Okay, thank you.
So Leslie, thank you
Yeah.
so much for answering these questions. And I know we have additional questions that folks might want to answer, but we have a policy panel that I want to turn to right now. And so we'll do that and hopefully have some time for questions at the end. And so I'm pleased to welcome Tara Brown, who's the Chief of Staff at the Institute for Market Transformation. And I'm going to turn it right over to Tara. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm really excited to be here and introduce some of your peers and colleagues that are already working on their projects to help give you a few more examples and case studies of what's possible. And so I'm just going to I'm going to make an introduction of each of them just quickly, and then let's dive into their projects and ask them a few questions around those. So the first person I'd like to introduce, I'm actually based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm going to introduce the person to the east of me, and that's Cecilia Govrick. She is at the city of St. Paul and is the energy coordinator there. She is responsible for decarbonizing municipal operations through a range of energy efficiency, renewable energy efficiency, and electrification projects. And then prior to coming to the city, she was actually at the consulting firm ICF, where she supported both federal, state, and local energy efficiency decarbonization programs, including the U.S. Department of Energy's Better Building Initiative. Celia, I see you up here. Might you want to share a little bit about St. Paul's project?
Sure. Thanks, Tara. Happy to. Thanks to U.S. Conference of Mayors for including St. Paul in this conversation. In St. Paul, we are very committed to climate action. We're very lucky to have a mayor and a city council and department leadership that support our climate work. So we're very happy to talk about it and share our experiences. As Tara mentioned, I work as the energy coordinator for the city. So my work is very much focused on our own city-owned building portfolio. So we have about 150 buildings that are city-owned and operated. Typical buildings, municipal buildings like fire stations, libraries, recreation centers, you know, kind of a range of building types and sizes and ages. But about 2.4 million square feet of building space. And back in 2019, the city of St. Paul adopted a climate plan that set the goal to be carbon neutral citywide by 2050, but set a more ambitious goal to be carbon neutral across the city's own operations by 2030. So again, this was 2019. So 2019 to 2030 is not a lot of time. It was a very ambitious goal. And the thought process behind that was the city is setting this citywide climate goal, but we need to lead by example within our own building portfolio. So when EECBG came around, I had just started working at the city, and the timing was really perfect to use that funding source. We have a $317,000 formula grant to hire a technical consulting firm to help us develop a municipal buildings decarbonization plan. So this plan is that action-oriented, like strategic roadmap for how we're going to reach the carbon neutrality goal in our city building portfolio. So I guess I'll stop there and maybe mention some details with some of our other questions coming up.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And if you could drop into chat what you name, the title of your project, and then how much funding you received for it from that you're applying to it for the EECBG versus the overall project cost, that would be really helpful. I want to hand it over to Cassie. Cassie Lacey is a senior management analyst at the City of Bend, Oregon. And she leads the city's climate and environmental initiatives, including the strategic planning, the program development and management, and policy development for the Bend's Community Climate Action Plan and the Strategic Energy Management Plan for the city operations and facilities. She facilitates the integration of climate action goals across the city departments and divisions and serves as a subject matter expert on the climate environment projects and topic through the organization. And Casey, just as I had Celia, if you could just give a quick, brief intro of your project, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So we had a total of roughly $152,000 allocated through EECBG, and we had proposed to split it up through a couple of different projects. One of them is to do an update of our community climate action plan. So the City of Bend established climate action goals in 2016, and then we did a really extensive public engagement process back then to adopt our first community climate action plan in 2019. And that's a plan that we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 and 70% by 2050 at the community scale. So we also committed at that time to updating that plan every 5 years. And so this funding opportunity, we don't have a sustainable funding source for our climate action program. So we felt really lucky that this funding opportunity came up kind of well aligned with our 5-year cycle of when we committed to updating our plan. So our primary use is going through an update process to that plan, and the funds are going to go primarily towards hiring a consultant who's going to do both a technical greenhouse gas reduction analysis for some of the proposed strategies and actions, and then also supporting staff with some of the public engagement that will go into that update plan. So that's our biggest project. And then our second biggest project is that our city council is also interested in pursuing electrification policies. They want to encourage households and also businesses in our community to be adopting electric buildings rather than natural gas buildings. And if anyone has worked in that space, you know, it's kind of it can be a kind of a controversial and tricky discussion to have. So we are hiring a consultant to help facilitate a discussion around what kinds of policies or programs does the City of Bend want to utilize to kind of achieve that end. And so that's also consulting dollars. They're going to help us do some research looking into what options have other cities used and sort of the best practices. And then also really extensive stakeholder and public engagement expected for that process as well. So those are sort of the two biggest projects. In our application, we also included funds for doing some electric vehicle site planning activities, and then providing funding for a low income program that we offer for a different energy policy. We have some energy requirements, and using this funding for a low income subsidy that we offer. And the nice thing that I have found with the EECBG funds is that it's flexible in that we are going to be able to, even if we applied, you know, we put budget allocations for each of those projects, but it's flexible enough that we can kind of reallocate that budget as needed, which we're finding that we are needing because costs are not matching exactly what we expected. So I'll stop there for my overview.
Thank you, Cassie. That is really something I really appreciated where you ended in knowing that you have that flexibility to move the funding around to your different projects and that you are finding success in submitting multiple projects under this, because that is a key concern that I've heard through the last year and a half is just the unknown of how that's working. So I really appreciate you sharing your experience to date. Tim and Janie are here from Jacksonville, Florida. And Tim, I'm going to start with you as the Vice President of CX Insights and Solutions at the Jacksonville Electric Authority. I know you can speak to the project, and then if you could introduce Janie, your colleague here, to speak to the grant and external funding. And Tim, you're on mute. Janie, are you maybe able to come off mute while Tim can get his working? Thank you.
Sure.
Tim.
Tim.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. I must have been double muted. All right. So we work, Janie and I, for the municipal utility in Jacksonville, Florida. And as such, we have a lot of restrictions on the funding that we can use towards energy efficiency projects. However, we were challenged by one of our board members and our chief customer officer to see what it is that we could do to assist with efforts that were underway in one of our historically underserved neighborhoods that had just received designation on one of the historic places registers nationally. And so one of the things that we did was to try and serve as a facilitator and an organizing resource for a number of local nonprofits who had similar goals of working in these underserved areas with home improvements, structural improvements, legal services, all different sorts of ways to keep homeowners within their homes and to make them livable. So as part of this, we launched a pilot study looking at 15 homes. And we went in, we did energy audits, we identified how they could be improved, we identified repair work that needed to be done. And this was mostly through private funds, through the United Way. And we used the results of that pilot study that we did to file the application for the EECBG grant, which we were successful at getting. And as part of that, we are now looking to improve between 75 to 100 homes over the term of this grant. But more importantly than just the grant itself, which we'll be using strictly for energy efficiency components, we still have private funds coming in through the nonprofits to work on the structural repairs and other services that will be provided. But part of the importance of this grant is it's also kind of serving as seed money that's allowing us to go out and to solicit more private donations through United Way. One of our previous board member who is engaged with the DuPont Foundation and United Way is looking to raise $10 million so that we can expand this citywide. So we're really looking at using these dollars in this historic neighborhood to kind of develop our processes, scale up, figure out how we can do things really well so that as the larger funds start coming in, that we're going to be able to scale this to other neighborhoods within Jacksonville. And with that, I'll turn it over to Janie and allow her to speak about the grant process.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you for letting me be here today. As I was listening to Leslie's presentation earlier, I started thinking about the municipal utilities that I work with and the information that we share among each other about grant opportunities and brainstorming about ways to work in a collaborative way with one another. And so that's one of the reasons I had that link readily available. I was starting an email to my other munis in Florida to say, check who's been allocated in your city and county, consider partnerships, and also check the list to see if they've already been awarded. But I say that because I think the way JEA went about this to pursue these funds with the city is a nice model to replicate. Being the local utility and working with our nonprofit partners and understanding the need, we approached the city with this project idea since they are the recipients of the formula allocation. And through that partnership, they understood the value added to this and to our community. Because again, we are looking at helping reduce the energy burden from a utility perspective. That's important from a customer, from a citizen in our community. That's truly important. And then also the workforce component. We are investing back into our community by allowing people to be better partners with us as a utility, pursue workforce opportunities through our procurement process, through the city as well, and also take that trade wherever they go. It's an educational opportunity. So once they are receiving this training, which is part of the audit, what is it called, Tim, a BPI?
Yes, the BPI energy audit for the homes.
They'll be able to take that wherever they go. It's like any other education. And this is a certification for them. And so it made so much sense for us. And so the example that I really want to leave you with is, again, from a grant perspective, is that all of us working together to help not only use the dollars that we're getting through this grant, but then further those dollars through other contributions, through the private donations, through our nonprofit partners, and through the city of Jacksonville. So it's a nice collaboration. I will say too that from a grant perspective, the flexibility that Leslie spoke about, it is incredibly flexible. I will say that looking at all the funding opportunities that I look at, this is one of the best ones that I've seen and been able to work with in not only helping the business side implement this, but also to just the ability to work with Leslie on what we wanted to accomplish. And then DOE has really set us up for success. They have a blueprint of activities, and we just crosswalk that. We looked at all the pieces that we were doing with this pilot project, and they just so nicely folded into conducting these energy audits, looking at doing energy efficiency upgrades, doing the workforce training piece. It all just made sense. And so I encourage you, if you're thinking about that, to look at those eligible activities that DOE has outlined and then match what you're already doing to those activities to look at evaluation metrics. It'll come together really nicely.
That's awesome, Jeannie. And you touched on two things that I'd like to ask the entire group about here. One is those additional KPI and metrics. So the goal of this grant is to reduce GHG emissions, but there are other KPIs, key performance indicators that people can use. Janie, you touched on energy burden. Can anyone else share other measurements of success that they're utilizing to ensure this project makes an impact in their community? And Jeannie, you talked about workforce development. Is there a way that you're measuring that?
Yes, thank you so much for asking me that. The workforce development piece, certainly the number of participants that we will work with through the training and the certification component. And then we will continue to monitor that and assist them with other opportunities. Like I mentioned, we are an independent authority of the city, so our utility has work opportunities through our procurement process, and then the city also has that. So as we continue to follow this, we can also see those benefits and measure that, if you will, by the number of opportunities that we're able to put out there into the community and be received by people who receive this training.
I can speak to ours a little bit. Since our projects are primarily planning sort of at the policy level, the primary way we are planning on measuring that is through projected greenhouse gas emissions reductions from those policies. For the low income, the other two projects, the EV chargers and the low income program subsidy, we can measure those with just number of EV chargers provided. And then for the low income program, like number of home energy audits created through this program. And another thing that I just wanted to share for anyone who hasn't looked at the application yet is that, and this may have been because I did take a blueprint path for these, but the application and the program has a bunch of proposed progress metrics, and that really helped me think through, like, it made that step of trying to figure out how are we going to measure progress and how are we going to do this easier, because they had in the application, there's a lot of proposed ways that you can measure it. So I was able to leverage that.
Thank you. And I'm glad that you brought up the blueprints, because this is a new portion of EECBG this round that allows it to be easier for cities to like both plan and access the funds. And I wondered, beyond like the measurements there, can the group share what benefits are they finding in the blueprints, and which blueprint did you choose?
I can share. For St. Paul, our project kind of is a combination of the content in a couple of the blueprints. Blueprint 1 for energy planning and Blueprint 2A for building audits and projects. Our municipal buildings decarbonization plan has kind of two channels to it. We're looking portfolio wide at the strategies to reach carbon neutrality, like across all of our buildings, but there's also this second portion where we are prioritizing buildings for electrification. So we're actually going to be walking away from this plan with a list of our top 10 priority buildings to electrify over the next 5 years. And our consulting firm will be developing actual building level electrification plans. So we're using, like, touching on Katie's question earlier about, do you go with the planning side or the project side? We're using this planning process through the EECBG funding to set up a list of projects for the next 5 to 10 years. So we are relying on some of the guidance and the resources from a couple of the blueprints kind of mixed together.
Janie or Tim, anything to add?
I do not. Go ahead, Janie. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay. I was going to say, I've actually pulled up our attachment for the EECBG, and I would be happy to share it just so that everybody can see a glimpse of how we align this. We managed it this way not only for easy reading and for the program officers who are going to be reading the grant to see it, but also because it was a nice crosswalk for how we brainstormed in developing the application. Here's an activity. What do we do? An eligible activity under the grant. What will we be doing that will align with that? So would you like me to share my screen?
Are we able to? I think that's a great attachment. As we're ending here, we do have the ability to attach that to this meeting post meeting. So that'll be great, Janie. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
We have just one more minute for a question before I hand it back over to Michelle. And I just wanted to ask you guys, now going through this, what is one thing you wish you could tell yourself at the start of this project? Like, what advice do you have for the people that are still applying?
I'll offer up again partnerships. Don't forget about your local utility or other entities within the city that also work in these areas of specialty, whether it's the transportation, in our case, the Transportation Authority, the Port Authority for us, things like that. Look at those other governmental entities and also your nonprofit sector.
I guess I would just say get started because it does take a while. Even if you have a formula grant that's sort of like guaranteed funding, it's still grant application paperwork, and you have to work across different departments in your community and go through all the steps in order to get the free money. So get started. I will say that we did our pre-application last spring and then applied in the fall and were awarded at the end of 2023. And it's now August, and we are just finalizing our contract with our consultant. So there were some other things that delayed things on our end, but it did take a while just to get up and running. So get going.
And I would just
I
echo
think
what's
that
already been, oh, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, please.
Oh, I was just going to echo just what's been said about the flexibility. And I know sometimes it can be a challenge. There's a lot of questions about, is it worth going after this federal funding or not because of the challenges of federal funding? And so far, at least, we have just found this one to be flexible and like just so flexible. It hasn't felt like there's like a downside to it. So if it's something you're not sure of, it's a very worthwhile opportunity to go after.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, be patient and understand it takes time, especially in our case as a subrecipient. We have to go through the city's process for allocating funds and all of the agreements and contracts that have to be signed with us and the nonprofits that we're working with. So it was really probably about a 6-month process to get, once the award was made, before access to funding was actually provided to us. So understand that as well as part of your planning.
Well, thank you guys so much again. You get me excited and miss the government role that I used to play. We have so much more that they will support. Michelle, can you end this webinar for us? Let us know what's next.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much, Tara, and thank you to our panelists. This has been super helpful. As we wrap up, we have a few questions for you that we'll hope you answer via this Zoom poll. These questions very much will help us do better in our programs and tailor them to your needs. And while you finish the poll, I wanted to share a few of the upcoming opportunities for you. First, related to today's session, you will see in the poll that we're offering one-to-one technical assistance if cities need help applying for EECBG vouchers or grants. Our team, including Tara, who you just heard from, is ready to assist you. And so please let us know if a consulting session to go deeper would be helpful to you. We also have coming up on Tuesday, September 10th at 2 p.m., a series, that's Eastern time, a series of webinars that will help cities prepare to leverage the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is an enormous $27 billion investment to mobilize financing and leverage private capital for clean energy and climate projects. So that's a series coming up. And then on Wednesday, September 25th at 2 p.m., we're hosting a session on how to responsibly use AI for federal grant writing and reporting. We'll discuss how AI can streamline the grant writing process, improve the quality and competitiveness of applications, and free up valuable time of staff to focus on planning, community engagement, all the other components. So in this session, we're very much going to focus on the potential pitfalls, including ethical considerations, data privacy concerns, and the need for obviously human oversight and to ensure that there's accuracy and you're meeting the community goals. But, you know, AI being a potential tool to increase efficiency for all of us, this is an effort to help our cities understand how to use this for federal grant writing. So an important session, Wednesday, September 25th. And so finally, I'm going to wrap it up by saying thank you to our partners. As always, it's such a pleasure working with all of you, and thank you to those who have joined, and we will see you next time.